Thank you, Senator Stillman, Senator Fleischman, and members of the committee. I'm Joe Markley, the state senator from the 16th District in Southington. And I have with me here somebody I think that can be very illuminating to the group. Dr. Sandra Stotsky. I will not go into her resume in depth. I'll just mention three things. She's received a doctorate in reading research from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. She was employed as a senior associate commissioner at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, where she was in charge of developing or revising state K-12 standards, teacher licensure, administrator licensure regulations. And she served on the Common Core Validation Committee and was one of the 5 members of that national committee who would not sign off on the standards as being validated. And I think that her concerns about this are particularly illuminating, and I will turn it over to Dr. Stotsky.
Thank you. Am I close enough? You're fine. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here. I come from Boston to speak here because I hope that this is the opening of a very badly needed process that would allow parents, teachers, and state legislators in particular to become more aware of the details of the Common Core initiative and all of its various implications. I was on, as you just heard, the Common Core Validation Committee from 2009 to 10, and I was one of the 2 content experts on that committee. I was the English language arts expert, and the other content expert was the only mathematician on this validation committee. Let me briefly explain what the function of the validation committee was. It was set up to look at several things about the standards that were being developed. First, we were to assure that they were internationally benchmarked. Second, that they were research-based. Third, that they were rigorous. And Professor Milgram from Stanford University could not conclude that they were internationally benchmarked, rigorous, or research-based. He was, as I say, the only mathematician on this committee. And I, from the English language arts perspective, could also not make the conclusion that they were these things that we were expecting them to be. Nor could we get information about the countries we were supposedly benchmarked to. We certainly knew what the research evidence was. Professor Milgram's comments on the mathematics standards I have heard nobody refer to today. You have had nobody from higher ed, which I think is a distressing omission, and I mean higher ed from the engineering, mathematics, or science departments at one of your major universities or colleges. You should be hearing from them. I was also on the State Board of Education in Massachusetts from 06 to 10. And I was simultaneously wearing many hats, as you can see. And one of the things I wanted to have take place in Massachusetts very badly was input from teaching faculty at our higher ed institutions. I couldn't get that meeting arranged because Massachusetts was already promising for $250 million to adopt Common Core standards. That was the race to the top offer. So we have a situation in which the people who should be judging college readiness, which would be higher ed people who teach freshman college courses for most of your seniors who go on to college in the state, were not there. We did have Jason Zimba, who is the chief math standards writer for Common Core, come for a March 2010 meeting, and I asked him to explain college readiness. This was his answer, and it's on an official videotape. They are minimal readiness for non-selective colleges. If this is what Connecticut expects and wants, this is what you have. He said they do not prepare for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. This is directly from him. This was Professor Milgram's observation. There is a gap between the weak Algebra 2 standards That is where Common Core's math standards end. And the beginning course that would need to be taken in mathematics if you wanted to be a mathematics, science, engineering, economics, computer science, finance, and possibly other majors. So these are the people that you would need to hear from to get better information than I can give, because they can read mathematics standards at the high school. Yes?
Just, the bell did ring a couple minutes ago.
I'm sorry.
The bell indicated 3 minutes rang
all right.
a couple minutes ago. If you could say.
I will just say that I'll be happy to answer any questions about that, and that I have prepared a testimony that is available to you about the flaws in the English language arts standards, as well as a fact sheet because of my experience on the validation committee and on the state board in Massachusetts for 4 years, until after the vote to adopt Common Core. I think I'll end at this point. That's about 5 minutes, or 3 minutes.
A very basic question. You indicated that you were one of the no votes on the Common Core standards. Do you recall what the overall vote tally was on the adoption of those standards?
Yes, there were between 25 and 29 members. The 2 content experts, Professor Milgram and I, voted against it. 3 other people did. All the rest did. Most of them were in schools of education connected to the testing industry or administrators in the public schools. That was all the rest of the others. But the only mathematician did not vote for them. And the others were not mathematicians. They do not typically teach mathematics courses at the college level, because there are a lot of people who do not understand what a mathematician is, as opposed to a mathematics educator who is located in a school of education and does not teach the freshman math courses that your high school students would take when they went to college.
So to come back to my question, the tally of the vote regarding the Common Core was about 24 to...
It was all the other members. It might have been 24 or 25. There is a report on the web from someone, Dennis Doyle, who was asked to prepare a report. But he does not, that report does not indicate the minority positions, because he was not given that information by the CCSSI project leaders. So you have the few content experts versus those who do not teach math or English at the college level.
And is it your testimony that the math standards are essentially not rigorous enough?
According to Professor Milgram, they are a disaster.
So for those on this committee or who testified before this committee who said that the math is developmentally inappropriate and too demanding, you're coming from a different perspective and saying you think it needs to actually...
That's a very good question, because the problem for blanket judgments is that the standards change in their quality. At the very beginning, they are developmentally inappropriate because they are too demanding in math, or K1-2. But as Professor Milgram points out, and he is familiar with mathematics standards across the world, because mathematics is the same, basically, for anyone understanding what's in algebra and geometry. By middle grades, they become very weak, so that our students will be at least 2 grades behind their peers internationally. And then by high school, he is saying they need to be totally revised, which is the basis for one of my major suggestions, as a matter of fact, to this committee and to the governor as well, to set up a revision committee. But according to both Professor Zimba, he is now retired from Bennington College, and Professor Milgram, who is now emeritus from Stanford University, you are missing standards to get from Algebra 2 to Calculus 1. And anyone who has been to an engineering college knows that you begin with about a Calculus 1 level in order to complete 4 years. So this is the problem you face in Connecticut, where you have a highly sophisticated parent and student body as well. And what you need to be able to do, instead of the governor forming a task force, I would strongly recommend he form a revision committee to straighten out and strengthen the math standards, because math is the language of science. It's not just math that is being hurt by Common Core's missing standards at the high school level, which I cannot read because I am not a mathematician, but your high school math teachers can tell you that. I've not heard from a high school math teacher here yet either, by the way. But your high school science teachers would also tell you that because math is underlying the lab-based physics course in grade 12, as well as a pre-calculus course, which your students badly need. Now, I have heard from many people who will say, oh, you can add whatever you want, but the standards aren't there in Common Core. Where do you get the standards from for those missing standards and missing coursework? Within a couple of years, the pipeline for STEM will shrink in the public schools. There's an equity issue here I want to bring up, because public schools will not be preparing kids for STEM. Private schools may be, or parents who can afford tutors, but not public schools unless they have pressure from well-to-do parents or mathematically sophisticated parents who can say we need pre-calculus standards to get our kids to calculus.
Thank you for that clarification. And let me just mention to you in terms of Connecticut's process. So we do have testimony that's come in from people involved with higher ed, from math teachers and so forth. You haven't heard from them yet because we're only at number 15 on a list that's 120 something.
I agree. I haven't heard
the list is determined by law. Are there questions from members of the committee? Representative Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Stotsky, thank you very much for your, I'm over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for your testimony today. I was reviewing your written testimony to the committee, and it perhaps is my omission, but I cannot find your comments about the Common Core standards not being internationally benchmarked. And if you could just briefly reiterate those, because it's important as we move forward, and in terms of the pivotal focuses of Common Core, to create students who are college ready, and we talk about the international community. It has always seemed to me that in Connecticut in particular, we test all students, and it takes quite a lot to be exempted from testing. And when you test most students, the result that you get is an averaging of all of those scores, whereas in other countries, not all students receive similar percentages of testing. You may have kids who are already tracked for other divergent careers and paths in life. So what I'm trying to understand in your commentary is, are we really comparing apples to apples internationally? And what would be your comments on how the Common Core standards are not, as they exist, internationally benchmarked?
The international benchmarking process would take a look at the high school level in particular. Another index would be the introduction of standard algorithms in the elementary grades, and I can come back to that later. But it would look at how many students are prepared for calculus. And that information is available from other countries in terms of the coursework that is offered that is part of their high school syllabi. Most countries don't actually have standards. They offer high school syllabi. And they would show you that in, for example, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, other East Asian countries, and in Flemish Belgium, and I can go into that peculiarity at a different time, there are students who graduate from their high schools, many of them, far more than we produce as a percentage, who are capable of going into STEM careers, and they do.